The Curse of the Honjo Masamune. The blade resurfaces. Kenji Nakamura had spent his life chasing legends. As a historian specializing in lost artifacts, he had tracked down missing relics across the world. But none intrigued him more than the Honjo Masamune, the fabled katana of Japan's greatest swordsmith. Lost after World War II, rumors of its whereabouts had remained elusive, until now. An anonymous email arrived in his inbox with a single line. The blade is in Tokyo, but some things are best left buried. Attached was an address, a crumbling antique shop in an alley of Shinjuku. Ignoring the warning, Kenji arrived at the shop late in the evening. The old man behind the counter, his face weathered like ancient parchment, barely acknowledged him. "I know why you're here," the old man said without turning. Kenji tensed. "The Honjo Masamune. Is it real?" The shopkeeper exhaled heavily and reached under the counter, pulling out a wooden box wrapped in silk. Slowly he unraveled the cloth, revealing a gleaming katana, its edge so polished it seemed to drink the light around it. The steel shimmered with an unnatural sheen, almost as if it were alive. Kenji's heart pounded. This was it. "Take it," the old man said, pushing the box forward. "But once unsheathed, it can never be hidden again." Kenji hesitated. "What do you mean?" The old man's eyes darkened. "The blade thirsts. It was never meant to be wielded by mortals. Every hand that has held it met a fate worse than death." Kenji smirked. "Superstitions. It's just a sword." The old man sighed. "Then go, and pray you never see its true nature." Kenji took the sword and left, eager to study it. But as he walked through the quiet streets, he felt watched. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally. Footsteps echoed behind him, though no one was there. A flickering streetlight revealed a reflection in the blade, his own face, but twisted in an expression of agony. At home, he placed the katana on a stand and stared at it. The beauty of the craftsmanship was undeniable. But then he noticed something strange. The blade. It had fingerprints. Greasy, blood-stained prints along the steel. But they weren't his. A chill ran down his spine. The air in his apartment turned icy, and a faint whisper brushed against his ear. "You took what was never yours." Kenji spun around. The room was empty. Then, the katana moved. Not much, just a slight tremor, enough to make the stand creak. Kenji took a step back, and then the whisper returned, louder, closer. "Blood must be paid." The lights flickered, and behind him, reflected in the glass of his window, was a figure. A samurai, armor rusted and torn, his face obscured by a cracked mask. The katana was in his hand, and it was raised. The Honjo Masamune is one of the most famous and mysterious swords in Japanese history, crafted by the legendary swordsmith Honjo Masamune during the late Kamakura period, c. 1264 to 1343. Masamune is widely regarded as Japan's greatest swordmaker, known for forging blades of extraordinary sharpness, resilience, and beauty. His swords were prized by samurai and shoguns alike, and the Honjo Masamune became the most renowned of them all. The sword's name comes from Honjo Shigenaga, a samurai general who acquired it in battle during the late 16th century. According to historical accounts, Shigenaga was attacked by an enemy wielding the sword, but he survived and claimed the blade for himself. Later, he sold it to the ruling Tokugawa clan, and the sword eventually became a symbol of the Tokugawa shogunate, the powerful military government that ruled Japan from 1603 to 1868. It was passed down through generations of shoguns, held as a treasured heirloom, representing power and authority. For centuries, the Honjo Masamune remained in the hands of the Tokugawa family. However, its fate took a tragic turn after World War II. In 1945, following Japan's surrender, the Allied forces ordered Japanese citizens to turn in their weapons, including family heirlooms and historical swords. Tokugawa Ieyasu, a descendant of the last shogun, surrendered the Honjo Masamune along with other prized swords to U.S. authorities. From there, it vanished without a trace. The last known record suggests that the sword was handed over to an American soldier. But what happened next remains a mystery. It is believed that the Honjo Masamune was either lost, stolen, or taken overseas and hidden away in a private collection. Despite efforts by historians and collectors to locate it, the sword has never resurfaced. Some believe it may still exist, stored away unknowingly, or waiting to be rediscovered among the many artifacts seized during the war. If the Honjo Masamune were ever found, it would be one of the most significant historical discoveries in Japanese history. More than just a sword, it represents the legacy of the samurai, the skill of a master craftsman, and a lost treasure that has captivated historians, martial artists, and collectors for decades. The blood debt. Kenji's breath hitched. His reflection in the window no longer mirrored his own movements. The samurai in the glass stood rigid, his rusted armor whispering with decay. The katana in his grip gleamed. The Honjo Masamune. Then the figure moved. Not in the glass, in the room. A metallic scrape echoed as the samurai stepped forward. Kenji stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The room plunged into shadow except for the dim glow of the sword. His mind screamed for logic. This wasn't possible. And yet, the katana on the stand was gone. It was in his hand now. Kenji didn't remember grabbing it, but there it was, his fingers wrapped around the hilt, his pulse thundering in his ears. Blood must be paid. The whisper slithered through the dark. The samurai took another step and Kenji saw his face, half-rotted, flesh peeling away to expose a gaping wound on his throat. His eyes, hollow and endless, bore into Kenji. This was no legend. This was a revenant. Kenji tried to move, to drop the sword, but his body wouldn't obey. His grip tightened involuntarily. The blade felt impossibly heavy, as if it was drinking his strength, binding itself to him. Then the samurai spoke. "You are chosen." Kenji's body jerked forward against his will. His arms lifted the katana. His own voice, alien and strained, rasped a reply, "I accept." His vision blurred. Shadows swirled, pulling him into an abyss. The world twisted, reality fracturing like glass. And then, silence. Kenji woke up to daylight streaming through his window. He was standing in his apartment, the katana still in his grasp. The room was untouched, no sign of the samurai, no shattered lamp, no flickering lights. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? He exhaled shakily and turned toward his reflection. His breath stopped. The man in the mirror was not him. It was the samurai. Kenji staggered back, but the reflection remained, watching him with those hollow, endless eyes. Then, the figure in the glass lifted its hand. Slowly, deliberately, it removed its mask. Kenji's stomach dropped. The face beneath the mask was his own. A scream built in his throat, but before it could escape, his reflection lunged, and the world went black. Kenji Nakamura was never seen again. His apartment remained untouched for months, the katana left abandoned on its stand. Eventually the landlord, assuming he had fled to escape debts, auctioned off his belongings. A collector purchased the katana, marveling at its pristine condition. He smiled as he traced his fingers along the steel. Then he noticed something. A fingerprint, greasy, blood-stained, and faintly in the silence of his home, a whisper curled around him. "You took what was never yours. The blade thirsts, and it will never stop."